This Week in Connecticut with Dennis House starts now.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Connecticut. I'm Dennis House. Straight ahead today, we are talking about the 2026 race for governor. A new candidate has come forward to challenge Governor Lamont, who hasn't officially announced his re-election plans yet. I'll sit down with Josh Elliott to talk about why he is taking on his fellow Democrat. Summer is home buying season, but what about mortgage rates? We'll discuss with Jonathan Esposito of Rise Mortgage. Plus, it's her turn, girls flag football spreading across Connecticut, and these players will be on ESPN. We'll talk with Brandon and Isabella Jubri. But we begin with the race for governor, a new candidate set to take on his fellow Democrat, Governor Lamont. We are joined now by State Representative Josh Elliott. And Representative Elliott, good to see you here in the program.
Hey, Dennis. Always good to be here.
So for those who don't know you,
yes,
give us a little synopsis of your background.
Happy to. I grew up in Guilford. I went to high school in Hamden. I left for a few years, Ithaca, but I came back ultimately and went to Quinnipiac Law School, and that is what helped me get into Hamden. And then, of course, once I was there, I loved it there. Been there for the last 16, 17 years. And fast forward to the Bernie campaign, and all of a sudden I get involved on that campaign as a volunteer. And I'm knocking doors in New Hampshire, knocking doors in Massachusetts. And when it was over, I was approached by Labor, who basically said, hey, we don't think that you are represented by somebody who mimics your ideals. And so I thought about it for a bit, and I ended up announcing against then Speaker of the House, Brendan Sharkey. And just like now, this was not a personal thing. This was simply based on policy. A few weeks later, he decides he wasn't going to run again. Then it was me against the next in line. I lost my convention 19-3, but I won my primary 60-40. And I've now been elected for 9 years, and I am the deputy speaker. I'm screening chair for the Speaker of the House. I'm caucus co-chair, wearing a few different hats, and I love the work.
And now you're running for governor. Why do you want to be governor?
Well, being governor means that you have an opportunity to do really good things for our state. And what I believe in this state is that we have the haves and the have-nots. And so what I'm really clear about talking about on this campaign is this is not about attacking anybody, but it is looking at a system that is deeply unfair. What we do is we cement wealth in this state. The reason I say that is every few years we put out a tax incidence report. And what that shows is the more money you make in our state, the less you pay as a percentage of your income to state and local taxes. So what happens is property taxes hike up, and all of a sudden we're looking like we have all this money coming in at the state level. If we don't give it back to municipalities, we end up crushing working families. The people on the higher end of the income ladder end up being totally fine.
You're obviously unsatisfied with the job that the governor's doing.
That's correct.
But specifically, what do you not like about his performance?
Well, what it is every year we bring up different ways that we can make life easier for working families here in Connecticut. And the public doesn't necessarily see the ways with which he kills ideas or slows ideas down. So one thing the governor's been talking about is how we're similar on the minimum wage. True, he agreed with Labor that he would get that over the finish line, but then when we started negotiating, instead of trying to have it implemented over the 2-3 years, it was 4, 5, or 6 years, and he tried to negotiate us out. When we're talking about paid family and medical leave, something that I ran on and I really believe in, instead of saying I believe in government to run this program, it was I want a private entity, a public-private entity to run this program. So even places where we agree, we sort of disagree. And then, of course, you can look at just a few weeks ago when he vetoed the housing bill, totally disregarding the fact that there's incredible need in our state. He vetoed SB 8, which is a bill to help striking workers just to afford to be able to, while they're negotiating with management, be able to live. And so to me, this is just, those issues are microcosms of something bigger. Ultimately, to me, it's how are we making Connecticut affordable? And I want somebody in there who's actually going to be acting on those and not just providing lip service.
As you know, the governor has said that there were some companies that were against that, the labor bill that would have allowed striking workers to collect unemployment. How do you attract businesses to a state when, as the governor called it, that was an anti-business measure, he said?
Totally understand where he's coming from. The fact is, when you look at the numbers, less than 1% of all strikes end up going past 2 weeks. So ultimately, this wasn't going to affect a lot of people. What this was going to do is ensure the worst actors had a reason to come to the table and negotiate more fairly. My feeling is we've seen labor, the amount of people that are in unions go down precipitously over the last few decades. And so to act as though business is in some way being attacked on behalf of the people that make sure that business works, to me, is sort of silly. And I think that if you're gonna be in this position, you have to take on hard fights, and just saying, okay, business, you're right, is not taking on a hard fight.
Deep down, do you want to be governor, or do you want Governor Lamont to be a more progressive governor?
Both things can be true. I do want to be governor. I've been having these conversations for a few years. The expectation was that he wasn't going to run again. When he ran the first time, he said a one-term governor. When he ran the second time, he said 2 times and then done. And for me, it's not a matter of you've been there for too long. It's a matter of how can we get things done for Connecticut that need to get done with somebody who's shown year over year that he's antithetical to meeting the needs of the middle class.
How would you recruit businesses to Connecticut?
I think what businesses want to see is more access. They want to see more culture because ultimately businesses are there to make money, but they are made up of people. And the people that live in our state want to live in a state where people are taken care of, where there are things to do, where there's things that are attractive about it. Certainly we have things that are natural, like the landscape and that we need to keep open space and things like that. But we also need to make sure that housing is affordable. How are you going to attract a business if people literally can't afford to live there?
And in terms of, if elected, what would Connecticut look like under a Governor Elliott?
The first thing we would do is really start to tackle this issue of how we tax. The reason I say that is take a look at Hamden. Over the last year, we've had this reevaluation. People's taxes are going up by $3,000 to $4,000 a year. Now, you can say at the state level, look how good of a job we've done paying down our pensions. But if we're neglecting to put back about $1.5 billion that's coming under that volatility cap threshold and not divvying that out to municipalities that are under incredible strain and need, look to Enfield, look to Norwalk, look to New Haven. They are gutting educator after educator. And all of a sudden, you're going to see these class sizes bloom. That's because the state isn't doing nearly enough. So what I believe is we need to ask our wealthy to pay in more, not to villainize or demonize anybody. If you have made money, that's great. That's what you should be doing. That's the goal. At the same time, you've done so because we've invested in our infrastructure. We've invested in our education. We've invested in our services. So what I would be doing first thing out the gate is creating a task force to look at what do we do to ensure that we're sending back money to municipalities, ensuring that municipalities are spending wisely, but we're going to add additional rates in the top brackets. This is not going to affect anybody who makes under $1 million. So I can assure you, if you make under $1 million, you're going to be untouched by anything that I want to do. I'm not a socialist. I'm not an anarchist. I'm a capitalist. I own a small business with my mother. I understand the need to attract businesses, but within the structure that we have, we need the wealthy to be paying a little bit more.
But the state has lost a lot of its so-called mega wealthy people over the years because of taxes here. Do you feel that you'll lose more?
It's a possibility. Here's what I'll say, that if you look to studies that go for 2 or 3 decades, when people leave or come into a state, it's totally unaffected by what's happening with the taxes. So there are certainly ways with which we have disinvested in our infrastructure here. So if you look to GE that moved to Boston, it's not like these places are going to other places that are cheap. They're going to places that are also expensive. The fact is we need to do more to ensure that regulation is easier. We still hold people to a standard, but get people through the system quicker, and ultimately we invite people in.
You mentioned the tax situation in Hamden, and many people out of state will say Connecticut is an archaic state the way it is set up with 169 towns.
That's right.
Wouldn't it make sense and save a lot of money if Hamden and maybe Wallingford, they were all part of New Haven? Would you encourage these towns to maybe join a bigger town next to them to save money?
So what I would encourage is we have something called COGS. This is the Council of Governments, and basically they're in different parts of the state. The state sends them money, and they work on different services that can be done within essentially a county-based system. But I believe you're absolutely right, because usually in states what you'd have is like a West Hartford taking care of a Hartford, or a Woodbridge take care of a New Haven, or a Fairfield take care of a Bridgeport. Right now we don't have that. And so that's how you make up for how regressive the property tax is. I do believe that there's significantly more opportunity to ensure that money is being spent wisely, done so economically. You shouldn't be having a call center in every single town. There's one call center for New York City. If they can do it, we can certainly do it. It's a hard ask because people don't like giving up that control, but I think you're absolutely right.
Quick final question because we're running out of time. But I wanted to ask you because when you were, a couple years ago, you were a big proponent of tolls.
Yes.
If you were governor, would you suggest that we have tolls?
Yeah, what I think is interesting about that is that the governor and I agree that we should have tolls. The reason is it's a user fee. So ultimately, you're asking people from out of state to pay your state to be able to use your resources. That's why I believe in it. And I believe that Listen, 30 years ago, you could get to New York City in about an hour and a half. Now it takes about 2 hours. That's a big difference.
So you proposed them if governor, you'd propose tolls?
The big difference between where I would be and where Ned was is that Ned kept changing what he wanted to see. You have to be really steady and clear about what you want to do, express that clearly, but then you got to be around the state and sell it because people have to understand why you're doing what you're doing.
So specifically, you would call for tolls?
I absolutely would.
Josh Elliott, candidate for governor. Best of luck. We'll see you on here again.
Thank you so much.
When we come back, we will be talking about mortgage rates and girls football.